Look at this massive pile of organic frozen raspberries. Today we are going to can raspberry jam. I'm going to show you guys all the different steps in making raspberry jam. Now, we don't have our own raspberry bushes here on the farm. We're going to be putting those in this year, and hopefully in the next few years I'll be able to harvest my own raspberries here on the farm. But while I'm waiting for that, I always head over to Azure Standard. If you guys don't know anything about Azure Standard, I'll put the link below and you guys can check them out. I order from them every month and I'm able to get organic ingredients for a super low price. It's really the only way I can afford to get all the organic ingredients that I get. And so once a year I'll buy, it's a 20-pound box. I think it's about $47 for 20 pounds of organic raspberries. Then I turn it into jam. I put some of it in quart-sized bags to use throughout the year. And so I am going to be making a bunch of raspberry jam today, so I am going to show you guys exactly how to do it. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to gather up all of our jars. We're going to check them for nicks on the top. We don't want any cracks in them. And then we're going to wash and rinse them. We're going to gather up our rings and our bands, and we're going to wash and rinse those as well. And then we're going to keep our jars warm. Now, you can keep your jars warm by having the canner, the water bath canner that you're going to use. You can, put the amount of water in there and bring it up to not simmering or boiling. It's just going to be warm water. And then you can set your clean jars in there, put the lid on it, and they can just stay in there and they'll just stay warm until you're ready to use them. You do not want to have a cold jar and then you put the hot jam in the jar. It's going to crack. So we always wash the jars and then we put them in the canner and we keep them warm in there so that when we put the hot jam, the jar will be warm and you won't have any sort of a problem. Now what I do, since I'm in the trailer and my canner is outside, I don't like to can in the trailer because it gets really hot and steamy. I've got a camping stove outside, so we'll be going out there to actually run the water bath canner. So to keep my jars warm, I have a little oven here, and I can put it on warm and I can bring it down to 90 degrees, as low as 90 degrees. So I just keep it on a low setting of about 100 and I keep it running and I set my jars in there and they stay nice and warm until I'm ready to use them. You could put them in the dishwasher and run, if you're going to wash them, and then in the end they'll be nice and warm and they can just hold in there until you're ready to use them. So there's many different options, but you just want to make sure they're clean, they're free of nicks, examine them for any cracks, and they're going to stay warm, and then you'll have your lids and your bands and those will be cleaned and ready to go. All right, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get our Pomona's Pectin ready to go. Now this Pectin, using Pomona's Pectin is really super amazing. Now in order to be able to get your fruit to be able to turn into a jam where it's thick and it's a set very thick, light jam, it normally needs, with other pectins, it normally needs 55 to 85% sugar. So if you're thinking, about you put the fruit in and then you put 50 to 85% that amount of fruit of sugar in there, the pectin is relying on that sugar to get that thick set. But with Pomona's, it is not going to rely on the sugar. You can make a very reduced sugar or even a no sugar jam. So it really lets the flavors of the berries shine because you're not masking it with so much sugar. So Pomona's is a pure citrus pectin. There are no preservatives, no dextrose, and the gelling power is from the calcium that is in the little calcium packets. It is not the gel power is not coming from sugar. So you're able to have a super low sugar or no sugar jam by using Pomona's, because it uses the calcium packet versus the sugar. In a lot of jam recipes, you cannot double them, you can't triple them, but with Pomona's, you can double, triple, 3, 4 time batch without any problem. So it really, really helps to be able to get a big job done very quickly, because you're able to make a really super huge recipe instead of all these little single recipes. And what I love about Pomona's Pectin is you're not just stuck with just using sugar. You can use many different things. You can use agave, you can use honey, you can use many different kinds of sugars, you can use xylitol. You can use just about anything, because this is not relying on the sugar to set your jam. It's relying on the calcium, so the added sugar, it's just for flavor. You're not relying on it for the set of your jam. So after we get the jars ready to go, we're going to prepare our calcium water. This is the water that we're going to add to the jam, and the calcium is what's going to give your jam that thick set. So we're going to take part of the calcium out of here. I believe it's 2 teaspoons. We're going to take that and we're going to put that with some water, shake it up in a jar, and just set it aside, and we're going to use that in with our jam. So that'll be the next step, is getting our calcium water ready to go. Then the next step after that is we're going to prepare our fruit. Now, if I had been out picking my berries, out in the orchard, I would have to bring those in and take the stems off and get them all ready to go. Or like if you're making strawberry jam, you would have to, cut the stems off and hull them, slice them up, wash them, slice them up, get them ready to go. Since I just have a big box of frozen berries, they already are ready to go. And in this jam, we are going to mash them, but since these were already frozen, when they defrost, they're going to mush down. That is one benefit of using frozen berries versus berries straight off the vine. If I did have berries coming in, I would probably get them ready and I would freeze them, and then I would defrost them, and they would be very limp and they'd be ready to go, and it would save me the hassle of mashing them myself. So whichever way you go, you're going to wash and hull them and get them ready to turn into jam. Like I mentioned, I am not going to have to mash these, but if you were, I would use something like this. It's like I think a potato masher is what it's called, and I would just put the fruit in a bowl and I would just mash it up. So that's what you would use if you're using a fresh berry. Okay, once you have your fruit prepared, now you're going to add it into the pan, and one recipe is 4 cups of mashed fruit. So depending on how many recipes you're going to make, you're going to measure your fruit out, and you're going to put it, I like to put it in a heavy bottomed soup pot so that we don't have any scorching going on. Okay, once the fruit is in the pot, now we're going to add the calcium water. That's the water that we made in the jar, and we're going to add the 2 teaspoons, I believe, of that water. We're going to put it into the fruit, into the pot. Once the fruit and the calcium water are both into your heavy bottomed soup pot, you're going to stir it up really well, and then we're going to move on to preparing the sweetener. So if you're using sugar or you're using honey, you're going to measure those and you're going to put them into a bowl, whichever one you're going to use, and then you're going to add the powdered pectin, and you're going to put this into your sugar, and you're going to stir it so it's super well combined, the sugar or the honey, and get that very well combined, and then you're going to set that aside. Now back to the fruit on the stove, you're going to bring that to a full rolling boil. Once it has reached a full rolling boil, you're going to add that sweetener, that pectin sweetener. You added the mix the pectin in with the sugar or honey. You're going to add that into the fruit that has come to a rolling boil, and then you're going to stir it vigorously to dissolve everything. And it's going to take a couple minutes, and then it will cool it down for a second, and you'll lose that full rolling boil. But you're just going to stir it vigorously to dissolve everything, and then you're going to bring everything back up to a full rolling boil again. And then that's it. You're going to remove it from the heat. Now it's time to get the jam into the jars. So you're going to go and you're going to get your warm jars, whether you have them out in your canner or you have them in your oven on low, or your dishwasher. You get them out and you put them on the counter, and then we're going to fill the jars, and we're going to leave a head space. So we're not going to fill all the way to the top of the jar. We're going to drop it down about 1/4 of an inch, because you need to have that little bit of head space for the lid to seal down and have a good suction vacuumed seal on your jar. Once you have your jars filled, then we're going to wipe the top of them and make sure there's no jam bits on the rim, because that will make your jar not seal, it may seal, but possibly you could have a failure for that lid to actually be able to come down and vacuum down onto your jar. So we want to make sure that rim is very, very clean. And then we're going to take the lid and we're going to set it on top of the jar. We're going to put the ring on it, and now we're ready to go get these jars of jam into your water bath canner. Now at this point I have brought my water in the water bath canner up to a very low simmer. So it's not boiling, heavily boiling, but it's very, very hot. And then you're going to lower your jars into that water. You're going to make sure there's enough water to cover your jars by an inch. Then you're going to put the lid on it, and you're going to bring that water up to a full rolling boil. So once it comes to a full rolling boil, we're going to set our timer. It's going to take 10 minutes. Once we have process these for 10 minutes, it's time to turn everything off, and we'll take the jars out and we'll set them out on the counter to cool. And then by tomorrow the lids will have suction down and they'll be completely shelf stable and ready to be stored in your pantry. So we are going to get started, and we're going to take you through every single step of this jam making process, and you're going to see just how easy it is. And you could do the whole thing all in one day and have a year's worth of jam on your shelf. That is just such a good feeling to be able to do it all at one time, and it is so delicious, and it isn't packed full of sugar and preservatives like the jam you'd find at the grocery store. If you were to go get organic low sugar jam at the grocery store, you're going to pay a lot of money for that, and this is a way to fill your pantry full of delicious jam that is low sugar and low cost. So let's get started. All right, so you're gonna want to very carefully run your hands along the top. If these are jars that you've used before and there's a chance that they've been nicked, I always check the top, because a nick on the top, a little crack, it's going to cause that lid to not be able to suction down, and you will not get a seal. And it'll be a failed jar of jam, and you'll have to eat it right away. So I always check the very top and make sure there are no nicks, and then I'll quickly just look at it and make sure there's no cracks, because sometimes you don't realize that maybe a jar just might be broken. So once you see that all your jars are free of nicks and cracks, then you're going to want to take those in and wash them up. Even if they're brand new jars, they have a really funny smell to them, and you want to wash them regardless if they're brand new or if you've been using them for a couple seasons. Alright, so the next thing to gather up is we're going to get the lids. These are the flat lids that are going to seal our jars. And these are brand new, and so I am going to wash all of these. So the way this is going to work is they're going to go right on top of your jar. And then this is wax. It gets soft. And so when you clean the top of this and then you set this down and then you take the band and screw that on, then it sits in the boiling water to process. That boiling water, it is going to soften this, and then when it's on there, and then when this cools, it will harden and it will seal it. And so that's how these work. So we're going to get enough of these for our jars, and then I am going to gather a bunch of the rings. I have a big old basket of them from previous canning jobs. So I'm just going to gather a bunch of these, and we're going to get these all into the house and wash everything up. Now I'm outside because I'm going to fill this up with water and go put it on my camping stove outside. And so I just wanted to show you guys, this is a water bath canner. It's different than a pressure canner. Pressure canner has bolts and you screw the whole thing down, but this is just a lid that comes off and on very easily. So I will link this in the blog post that I write, so you guys can find these. You can just get these on Amazon. They're not too much money. Inside, you'll notice it looks like a basket, and they just got these handles. And when you set this in, they stay perfectly like this, so that way, because if this is filled with water and it's hot water, you want to be able to reach in and you can pull this out, and then you hook this. See if I can do this one-handed. You hook it just like that, and then you can set your jars in, and then with both hands you can lower this down into the water and put the lid on. Now with this, it's for two purposes. It makes it very easy to load the canner, because if you just have pint-sized jars, it's going to be really hard to get that down into the water without them falling all over the place. So you can set them here and lower them all down at the same time. But it also creates a barrier between the flame, the bottom of the pot, and the actual jar. So if you were to set your jar just right in the bottom of this pot and that flame was hitting it, it would probably crack the bottoms of your jar. So when it's in this, this is gonna keep the jars from directly touching the bottom of the pot. Another option is you can order these discs, and I will link these as well. And you can just set this on the bottom. When I am using my water bath canner and I'm doing big quart-sized jars that I can just set right down in there, I don't really mess with this. I don't need to, because that's pretty heavy. By the time I got 7-quart jars and I put it down into the water, I get rid of this and I just put this on the bottom, and then I just set the big jars right on top. So just as long as you have something between the bottom and the bottom of the pot and your jar to protect them from breaking. Now, if you don't have a canner, you don't have anything like this, you can get, if you have a big soup pot, like a pot that's tall enough. So this is how you would gauge it. However big your jar is, if you can get enough water to cover your jar and then to cover it with 1 inch of water above that jar, you can use just a regular old pot that you have in your kitchen. You just have to make sure that you can get enough water to completely cover it and then to have 1 inch of water above it. So if that's a pint-sized jar, that's going to be very easy to do. If it's a quart-sized jar, you're going to need a little bit bigger of a pot. So if you just do a homemade version with your own stock pot and you don't have one of these, you could put a towel on the bottom so that the jar, but it is a little fussy because you got to make sure that it's flat and that the jars aren't tipping inside, but it can be done. If you just folded a towel and laid it down in the bottom, and then you put your jars on top of that, that towel would protect the jars from, being cracked from the heat. So, you can do that. Just make sure you have a stock pot that is big enough to get 1 inch of water above your jars. So I'm going to go over to the hose and I'm going to fill this. I'm probably only going to put about 1/3 or half of water, because of course as I put the jars on, the water is going to come up, and I don't want to have to take water out. So I usually fill it to about halfway, and then I'm going to go get it on the flame, and I'm just going to turn it to really, really low, and it'll take a super long time for it to come up to warm, and that'll be the amount of time that I'm making the jam. And then the water will be warm but not boiling when I'm ready to put the jam inside. Since moving into the trailer, we took the microwave out and we put this nice little oven. It's tiny, but it does everything I need it to. So I can put it on warm, and it'll go down as low as 110. So that's pretty warm. So I'm just going to turn that on, and I am going to, I have all my jars on a tray, And I just keep them in there. Now you can do something like that, or you can just put them in that water bath that the water's going to be warm and they'll stay nice and warm in there. So now we're going to prepare that calcium water that I was telling you about. So we've got the Pomona's Pectin. It's called Pomona's Universal Pectin. And I've got a half of a cup of water, and I've got the calcium package, and they'll say the names on them. This one says calcium and the other one says pectin. So I'm going to add, it's really easy to remember, it's a half a cup of water to a half a teaspoon of the calcium. And once you open this bag, if there's any left over, it's fine. You can just, actually, maybe a little bit left. You can just put it in a, fold it up, put it in a little Ziploc bag in your fridge, and it'll be fine. Now, if I knew I was going to be making a lot of stuff that would require pectin, I might make a little bit more, because this stuff lasts for a super long time. It will last for the whole season. Basically, like I could make a whole cup of it, and just whatever I don't use, I can just store it in the refrigerator. And as long as it looks perfectly fine, if you see like a layer of mold or scum, then just toss it out. It doesn't cost that much, but this will last for a super long time because you're only going to use 2 teaspoons of this in an entire recipe. But sometimes when I've got a lot of different jams, I'll make a bigger portion, and it just kind of sits on my refrigerator all summer. So with every box of Pomona's Pectin, you'll get some instructions. And if you look over here, I'm going to show you kind of how you would read these instructions. So on the column on the left says directions, and it gives you all the instructions step by step of what we're going to do today. And then next to it, you would just go down the column of where it says jam, and you would find what you're using. We're using raspberry, so that's going to be the first, this first section there. If we were doing blueberry, we'd go to the second one. Peach and nectarine fall in the third category. And each different fruit requires something different. So just find your column for the fruit that you're using, and then follow the instructions. So the first column, we've got strawberries, gooseberries, we've got raspberries. So that's what we're doing. We're doing raspberries. So if you look next to it, it tells you how to prepare the fruit. So it's basically you're removing the whole stems, pits, skins, and then you're going to mash it. And so that just tells you, some of them you can tell, some of them have a little more involved instructions. Like on some of these, you have to actually simmer in water. You have to do different things before you actually start making the jam. So for us, it's the easiest list of instructions. We're just gonna, mash, since we're doing raspberries and they've been frozen, they're already pretty mashed. So all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna measure them. I don't even have to, chop them or anything like that. Then on the far right, it'll tell you the ingredients. So for one recipe, we're gonna use 4 cups of mashed fruit. And then underneath it is your sweetener. Now remember, we're not having to use loads of sugar to make this jam thicken and become like set. And it's more for sweetness or for taste. And so they give you, whether you could use honey or sugar, they say a half a cup to 1 cup of honey, or 3/4 cup to 2 cups of sugar. That's a big difference. So if you're wanting to keep this low sugar, then go, and you're using sugar, go with the low end of that. Use 3/4 of a cup and just let the berries speak for themselves. So it's anywhere from 3/4 to 2 cups of sugar, and then honey, it gives you measurements there. Then underneath it, it tells you you're going to use 2 teaspoons of pectin and 2 teaspoons of that calcium water that we just made, and then it lets you know that it's making 4 to 5 cups of jam. So if you just look over these instructions, they're pretty self-explanatory. On the back, there's helpful hints and facts. There's ways that you can use stevia or no sweetener at all. You could actually make this with no sweetener. Those directions will be on here. Making jellies, that would be on here as well. So I just wanted to kind of go over the instructions with you. This is what I'm following today. We're doing the raspberry jam with maybe I'll use sugar this time. I used honey last time, and I want to see the taste difference on using sugar. So anyways, we're going to, since our fruit has already been prepared, it was frozen and now it's defrosted and it's soft, All we have to do is measure it and get it into our heavy bottomed stock pot. All right, so like I mentioned about a heavy bottom stock pot, there's, you know, if you've got a pot that's really super thin on the bottom, you're going to have a little bit harder of a time not having this scorch. So I just like getting a good quality stock pot that it's pretty solid on the bottom, and you can tell by looking at stock pots. So this is a 2-cup measure. So I am going to, I'm going to see how much 2 recipes is, and if I've got a lot of room left in here, I'm actually going to do 3 recipes. And so if we're going to do this, and I've got all these berries, I might as well get as much done. And remember, that's the thing with using Pomona's Pectin, is that you can double and triple and quadruple your recipes, where with other pectins you can't. You have to do them 1 recipe at a time. All right, so the next step is to add that calcium water that we made, to add that into the fruit. So 1 recipe calls for 2 teaspoons, so actually I'm doing 3 recipes, so I need to measure out 6 teaspoons of this calcium water and get it into the pot. Once it's in there, we're going to want to just give this a good stir. And I like to use metal because berries always stain my wooden spoons. So I always tend to use metal when I'm working with jam. We're done with the berries to this point. So now I'm just going to set this on the stove behind me just to get it out of the way. And now we're going to prepare the sugar and the pectin. So I'm going to use the low end of the amount of sugar. It's just 3/4 of a cup per recipe. And I'm doing 3 recipes, so I'm having to use this little measuring cup because it's the only one that fits in my sugar canister. At Pomona's Pectin box, you're going to find the second envelope, and it's printed on it, it says Pectin. So this is what is going to thicken your jam. So we use 2 teaspoons per recipe. So I'm going to be using 6. Okay, you're going to want to give this a good stir, get it well mixed. Next job is to bring this to a full rolling boil. So that might take a little bit of time. As you become more experienced with making jam and you can kind of do more than one thing at a time, a lot of times I'll put this on and I'll start heating it up while I'm preparing my sugar and pectin. But I didn't want to do too many things at one time for this tutorial. So feel free to get this going while you're doing other stuff. So we're just going to let this come to a full boil. It's almost there. I'm starting to see some bubbles forming at the top, so we're getting close to that full rolling boil. So now this is at a boil. When I stir it, you can't see the bubbles, but as soon as I stop stirring, they're going to pop all over the place and make a huge mess. So there you go. As you can see, I just don't want it to pop hot jam everywhere. But you can see that that's a rolling boil, or it's a bubbling boil. It would be a rolling boil if I stopped stirring it. So we've reached the point that we need to get to go to the next step. So the next step is to take that sugar that we mixed with the pectin, and we're going to add it right into here. And you're going to want to stir that in really, really well, vigorously. And then we're going to bring it back to that rolling boil. It'll take maybe a minute or 2. And then you'll be done. We're going to take it off the heat and start filling our jars. Making jam really is not that hard when someone breaks it down for you. It's just a few really simple steps. Most of the work is in preparing your fruit, and if you get it already done, that chore is minimized as well. Now, if you're going to want the printable recipe, go ahead and click the link in the description, and that'll take you to my blog where it will give you the full printable recipe and all the tips and tricks that I have written out there. Everything you'll need to know, as well as all the supplies, canners and those racks I was showing you, the heavy bottom soup pot, everything that you'll need to make jam. I'll have it linked there in that blog post as well. I think you can see the bubbles there. It's come back up to a full boil. So that's all we need it to do, is to just come back up. You don't need to cook it any longer after that. So I'm just going to turn it off the heat and prepare the jars to fill them. Real quick before we load these jars with jam, I'm going to show you a few supplies, and all of these supplies are going to be linked in my blog as well. So the canning jars, of course, I'll link pint size and half pint and quart size. I'll link all those. And then there's a funnel, and I love this stainless steel one. I don't like to use plastic with the hot stuff going in it, and it's toxic, so I just set that right on top. And then I have a big deep ladle that's stainless steel as well to fill everything. And then we will use, this is a canning tool, which I'll show you when we get to that. I'll have that linked. Of course, the lids and the bands. And then I have a little bowl of vinegar. I like to use it with a clean rag to wipe the tops of the rims. Vinegar cuts grease and just that sugary mess a lot better than water. So I always just have a little bowl of vinegar. So we're just going to fill these up, and we are going to get them to the 1/4 of an inch mark, and I'll bring the camera in and I'll show you how you know where to stop on filling these. So I'll bring my thing right up so it can just drip right. It doesn't drip all over the counter. And this is steamy hot, as you can tell. So if these jars were not warm and I put this in there, they would crack right away. That's why we want to either keep these in the warm water, or we want to keep them in a warm stove or a dishwasher or something. So I will just, I usually just kind of rotate these as I fill them. I'll bring the full one back here, and then I'll bring this one back up. I just kind of keep a little assembly line going. So you can take this tool, and you can notice that it has steps on it. So this step is, this would be marked at 1/4 of an inch, a 1/2 an inch, 3/4 of an inch, and an inch. So you can set that in your jar, and you can fill your jam to the bottom of that tool. So if the recipe said to give this an inch of headspace, I would bring this all the way down. This first step is an inch, and I'd set it on my rim, and then my liquid would touch the bottom of this. So if it's a 1/2 an inch, if it's 3/4, or if it's a 1/4. So I'm going to bring this up, and you can see I can actually add a lot more, because this is the bottom of the marker, and my jam is way down there. So I'm going to just use the measurements like I was showing you. And this first, not the rim, you don't want to bring it all the way to the top, but this first line here, that's a 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to fill it to this first line, and then I'm going to know that I'm at a 1/4 of an inch headspace. So we don't need a lot of headspace for jam. Alright, so I'm going to bring it back over here, and I'm just going to add a little bit. So go slow. It's a lot easier to keep adding than it is to take it away. And add just another little bit. That'll be about good. So that's right at the first little ring. Alright, so hopefully you can tell this is the inch mark, and then as you turn this jar around, where you can see this would be the 1/2 an inch mark, and then as this little lip comes up, and it's coming up here, we've got a 1/4 of an inch. So as you can see, my jam is right at that 1/4 of a mark. See, that's the 1/4 of an inch headspace. The other side of this, you want to make sure that there's no air bubbles in here. Because if there's an air bubble, it's not that it's bad, but it will discolor around the air bubble, and then the oxygen will cause it to discolor, and then your jam will just be ugly. So you go maybe a 1/4 of the way around each. And then that way you know you just disturbed any air bubbles. And if you do pop an air bubble and it causes the the jam to go down, then just add a little tiny bit more jam to bring it back up to that 1/4 of an inch headspace. So I'm just going to continue filling these, and we'll get these into the canner. So I'm gonna just go down the sides of each one, maybe go down the middle one time just to make sure there's no air pockets. If there's any jam right up close to the rim, I'm gonna just take it out just so that I don't have any food that's gonna be disturbing a seal. I've got my vinegar, and I'm just gonna go along the top of the rim and make sure that there's no sticky, sugary jam, because that will cause you to not get a seal. If it gets up underneath that part of the lid that's waxy, and then it softens, and then it tries to suck back down on your jar, if there's a glob of sugar or something, a jam, it won't be able to seal. Now we're going to put the lids on. We're just going to screw the bands on. Now when you tighten these, you just want to do it finger tight. You don't want to crank them. I mean, you want them on there, but you don't want to just tighten them super, super hard. Just finger tight like that. All right, these are ready to go into the water bath canner now. Now, when we put this into the water bath canner and we bring it up to a full boil, and the water is an inch over the top of the jar. The science behind this is all parts of this food needs to be completely under the boiling water. And that boiling water is going to be killing any bacteria that might be in here. So it's doing two things. It's killing any bacteria that may be in here, as well as it's softening this waxy part. This will get soft, and then when it cools, it will reharden, and it will vacuum pack down, and it will seal this jar so no bacteria can get in here. So if you've killed all the bacteria as it was being water bath, and then it's sealed, there's no bacteria, and this will now be shelf stable. And so you can put it on your shelf, and it will last. I mean, as time goes on, it will break down and the flavor will change. It won't be as good, but it will last years and years and years if it's not been opened, and it will be safe. I usually eat my jam within a year, and then when the next season comes, I make another year's worth of jam. So that's why when you put this into the water bath, you need to make sure that this is completely covered in water, because if the water is down here, this part isn't going to be as hot as the part that's under the water. It needs to be fully under the boiling water, and it has been tested, and the USDA, they have said that for jam, all bacteria in the jam, if it's under the water and it's at the boiling water, not just simmering, but like it's at the temperature of boiling water, all the bacteria in here will be killed in 10 minutes. And so that's how you know for safety that you need to follow the guidelines that the USDA has written, because they have tested for that. And there won't be, botulism or anything in your jar that would be, it could kill you. So if you know that you have followed the rules that the USDA has said, then you are safe. So just over it one more time, you just make sure that this is under the water by an inch because it's bubbling, and you just want to make sure that inch is just kind of giving you that cushion that if you're like losing water, if it's evaporating, it's gonna last, you know, enough. You've got an inch to play with. So as long as it's under the water, you've got an inch, and then you leave it in there for the amount of time that it says, 10 minutes, then you're good to go. Now, this has been tested for sea level. So if your elevation is 999 and below, you follow what the USDA says. But then they always say that whatever your elevation is, if it's over 1,000 feet, then you would add 1 minute. And then they give you can look that up, and it gives you increments of, you know, to that processing time. Whatever they say, you would need to add 1 minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, depending on what your elevation is. So you would find that out, find out what your elevation is, and then look at what it says on there, and it will say, you know, under 1,000 feet, do it for this amount of time. If it's over 1,000 to, you know, 2,000 or whatever it is that they say, you would know to add 1 minute for each increment. Let me get the directions. And it says on here to boil for 10 minutes, add 1 minute for every 1,000 feet above sea level. So you would know how to adjust it. I'm in the range where I can just do what the directions say. I don't ever have to change it, but it's not a big deal. If you just see your elevation, if you need to change it, just add 1 minute on. So we're going to go and get these into the water bath canner, and we'll start our time. Now the sun is kind of being weird for an angle here, but I think you can see. So as you can see, this is warm. It's hot. It's pretty hot, but it's not boiling. Now I should have grabbed this. That's pretty hot. But I'm going to hook this on the sides just like that, and then I can fill my jars right in there. Now I do want to show you this tool. A lot of the canner sets, they come with these, but this one I love. It has a spring, and it is, when you've been canning all day, this is just a much superior jar lifter than the ones that come in the kits. So I'm going to link this one in the blog post as well. I absolutely love this one. If you're going to do a lot of canning, I would suggest purchasing one of these. So I'm just going to set these. I only have 6 jars, and this holds 7. So I'm just going to go around in a circle. Actually, I can do this by hand at this point because these jars aren't very hot. And I'll keep it even, and I'll just put one right in the middle. And then I'm just going to lower it down, do it evenly so it doesn't shift and then the jars all go sliding to one end. So I'm just going to lower that down into the water. And as you can see, I do not have enough water in here. This is only to the bottom. It's in the middle of the rim here. So I'm going to add some water, and then it'll have to come back up and to heat, and it'll come to a rolling boil. When I add water, I don't add it right on top of the jars. I don't want to knock them over. I just do it on the side. Okay, it did go over, but I am going to still add just a little bit more, just to be on the safe side. All right, that's a good inch over. It'll take a little bit of time to come up to a rolling boil, so we're just going to let that go, and we'll set the time once it is a rolling boil. It's getting really close to boiling. It's not quite there yet, but it's almost ready. We just want it to be a full rolling boil. Alright, so it's at a rolling boil. So now I'm going to set my timer for 10 minutes, and then we'll just let it process, and then we'll come out and turn it off. Our timer just went off, so I am going to turn the heat off, and we're going to get these jars out of the water. Now, when you take this lid off, I'll show you, you're going to want to do it this way so that the steam goes away from your face. You could get a really bad steam burn if you just open it up and it goes into your face. So just turn the fire off, tilt it away from you, and then you can start removing these. The way to get these out is with this jar grabber. You can bring this up and rest it on the sides. And then you can take this and it just grabs, you get it underneath this lip. And then when you squeeze it, it'll pick it right up. Now you do not want to tilt this at all. You just want to bring it straight up and then carry it over to set where it's going to cool down. Now the reason why you do not want to tilt this, that wax has gotten soft. This is not sealed yet. This is still, that wax is still soft, and this needs to completely cool down. Then that wax on the underneath side of the lid, it's going to harden and then it's going to suck it down and you'll hear it pop. And once you hear it pop, you know it's sealed, and you'll be able to tell on the top it's sucked down. And so, but right now it is not sealed. It has to cool completely. So if you're going to tip this, that jam can get back up under the lid, and it can ruin it to where it can't seal because there's jam there. So do not tilt it. There is a whole layer of water on top of here. And no matter how tempting it is to just kind of tip it to get that water off, don't tip it. Just set it down. The water will evaporate. Now I have a table here in my outdoor pantry, and I have a couple towels on it to protect the table, and this is where I put my jars when they cool down. So I'm going to go get the rest of the jars out and get them all lined up here on this towel. Now as you'll notice, I have put these where there's a couple inches in between all these jars. You want to do that so that the air circulation, there can be space for the air to circulate around it so they can cool down all the way evenly. So just spread them apart like a couple inches between each jar, and don't tilt them, and you're just going to leave them here for about 18 hours. So tomorrow we'll come and we'll test the seals to see if they have all sealed. But while these are cooling, if they're in the house, you're going to hear little pings, like a click and a pop, and you'll be able to tell that it has cooled completely, and it has vacuum shut, and it has sealed. And this will start dipping down. It'll be you will be able to tell that it is sealed when you hear that pop go off. Okay, so these have been sitting out for 18 hours, and we're going to check the seal on them. So when you press down, these are solid. They've been vacuum packed down onto there. Now you might notice, you might think like, oh, she put 6 in the counter and there's only 5. But I needed a jar last night, so we're down to 5. But I'm going to bring the camera in and I'm going to show you what a good seal is versus I got an empty jar. I'll show you what one would be like if it didn't seal. So I hope you can tell on here, when I do this, you can tell that it gives. Like when I press it down, it gives just a little bit, and I can hear it clicking or popping, or you can tell that this is not sealed. Where when I press on one of these, it's like very solid. And if I was to take this ring off, this is not going anywhere. You cannot get this off. This has been sucked down versus, you know, well, you probably can't tell in the movie, but you would be able to tell if you got a jar and you pressed on this and then you pressed on this. So all of these, when you press on them, they all sealed. We'll want to check all of these within 18 to 20 hours. So just the next day, just go and feel them. And if one did not seal, if it was loose and popping, that's okay. Just stick it in the refrigerator and eat it within a week. It'll be just fine, even if it sat out for that amount of time. Just as long as you get it into the refrigerator in 18, 20 hours, then you can have it. But these can just go on your pantry shelf. Now, I want to bring out that a lot of times when you'll see pictures you'll in people's pantries, and they've got canned items, they've got them with the bands on them. You do not want to store these with the bands. You need to take these off. If this is what's holding this on, then it's not sealed. You're going to have botulism. This was just to hold it in place while it was in the canner, but now that it's canned, take this off and store it like this. So the reason why you do not want to store these with this on is I have had this happen to me where I felt it and it was sucked down and it was sealed, or so I thought. And I stored it on I took the lid off and I stored it on my pantry shelf. And then the next time I went and got it was a jar of tomatoes. The next time I went and got it off, it had actually been a false seal. It had sealed down during the moment that I was feeling it, but then it actually, when it got cooler outside, it hadn't sealed all the way, and it released and it let it go. And when it did, it shifted the lid just enough to where it couldn't seal back down. So I was able to identify it right away when I went to get it off. I thought, oh wow, this lid is off. There was tomatoes coming out. And so I knew to throw away that whole jar of tomatoes, because it had been sitting out in the pantry for 6 months and it hadn't been sealed. Now if that happens and it sucks down and it's sealed, and then like I said, it's a false seal, if you have this screwed on real tight, then there's a chance that it could suck back down and seal again. And if you happen to pick this up off the shelf during a time that it's tight right there, you'll never know that it's actually been releasing and sealing and releasing and sealing. That is very rare that happens, but it can happen. And so you're pretty guaranteed that these are all a good seal. But just to be on the safe side, take all these bands off and store them so that if it releases its seal, it will shift over just enough that it can never suck back down, and you will know when you go to get it. So the last step is these are pretty clean. Sometimes when I'm making something like chili or spaghetti sauce or something like that, some of this liquid can ooze out, and these might be greasy or dirty. So you'll want to wash them up real good in hot soapy water and dry them. And then you'll want to label the tops. Even if you think you know what this is, put a label on it, because the more that you can, and you know what it is when you put it on the shelf, and then all of a sudden you get other stuff on there that might look like it, strawberry jam, rhubarb, whatever, you will probably forget what it is. So go ahead and put what it is and put the date so you know how old these jars are. Don't stack them on your shelf like this. That's the same thing I was talking about as having these rings. This would hold that lid down. And if this happened to be a false seal and it came undone, then just having a jar above it could press it down enough that if the conditions were right in the weather, it could maybe seal again, and it would actually be bad contents because it had been unsealed for however long. So just do single layer, and these will last indefinitely. I mean, these are not going to go bad. The only reason I like to use them within a year is just because, once they're canned, I mean, the flavors, they're not going to be at the peak of freshness, the taste, 10 years from now. I mean, it's better within the first year, and then it slowly starts losing. If I had green beans on the shelf for 10 years, I know they would taste completely different than in the first year. So I usually don't can more than a year's worth, and get those onto your pantry shelf, and then you will have a year's worth of jam. If you want to go ahead and figure, maybe you might eat one a month, then can 12 or can 24 if you think you'll eat 2 a month. Just kind of do some math and think, how many jars of jam would I have? And then make that many, and you don't have to think about it again for another whole year. Well, hopefully you enjoyed that, and that was helpful to you, and now you know exactly how to can raspberry jam. So if you want the exact directions, go ahead and click the link below in the description, and it will take you into my blog where you can get the printable recipe, and you can see everything you would ever need to know about canning jam. Also, you can click the link below because I have raspberry series that I put together of all things raspberries. We've got a raspberry, it's called the raspberry buckle, that's like a coffee cake. We've got raspberry lemon muffins. I did a raspberry freezer jam. I did 2 raspberry drinks and a raspberry salad dressing. And so I put those all together. They're over in our freebie vault, so you can only access them by going over there. You're not going to find them on my blog. You're not going to find them anywhere on YouTube. Just all of those recipes, the tutorials and the printable recipes for everything raspberry, you'll find over in the freebie vault. So go ahead and click the link below to access all of that. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. That really helps my numbers, and I'd really appreciate to get a thumbs up. And if you love my content and you love, good cooking, then go ahead and subscribe and click that little bell so that you'll be notified every single time I post. I bring so much farm fresh, just good home cooking food to my channel, and so you're not going to want to miss anything.